Welcome everyone to a very special GAK9 Australia video review of Hans, the anti-poaching canine over in South Africa. Hans is a dog that I developed with the assistance of my friends and family here in Canberra, Australia, and with community support we got sufficient funds to fly him over to South Africa, where he was placed with Christian Visser of GAK9 Academy, who's a fantastic guy over there, and he placed Hans onto the Manyoni Reserve, where he's been ever since late 2023. While spending a week on the reserve working with Hans and Christian and the rest of the anti-poaching unit there and their dogs, one of the main goals that we had was to improve Hans's ability to start tracks. Now, in development, I trained Hans to typically start from start articles. As in an Australian policing context, that's a very common thing that you'll find is you'll be scenting from vehicles and similar when starting a real-world track here. Now, over in Africa, this is the polar opposite. What you'll often be starting from is visual sign in a very, very low contamination environment. This means that if the dog picks up on a track in vicinity of visual sign, then it is a very high degree of probability that that is the person that you need to be tracking. Over the span of the week, we started very easily and ramped it right up to this culmination track that you see here today. The key element was just setting the tracks up in such a way that Hans had the opportunity to discover for himself exactly how it is he needed to start tracks, which then gave him the confidence to follow them through to completion. Over the course of the week, we achieved some pretty great results, including Josh McDuff achieving a field specialist certification for him, which was very, very cool to see. Now, don't get me wrong, Hans has had some absolutely phenomenal operational successes in his time in Africa to date, but there are always areas for improvement with absolutely any dog. And that was the great focus of my time over the week in Manyoni, was to work with as many of the dogs as possible and their handlers to offer the insights and lessons that I know about tracking and impart them to those handlers there, building on a previous GAK9 trainer, Christina, who went over there in 2023. So it's really, really fantastic to be sharing our knowledge and skills with the Manyoni anti-poaching unit, and looking forward to continuing this relationship in the future. All right, let's get really into the nitty-gritty now of what it is that we are seeing in this video. So the goal here is to build up Hans's ability to work with a ranger unit as they're conducting high-risk tracking, particularly in the pursuit of rhino poachers. So there's a lot of elements that go into that. The track starts are one. This track start here is a beautiful one, as Hans has been working the entire time that I've been talking down this road. And we'll see here in just a moment that he's going to jump into the bushland where the track layers have physically gone, which is very, very cool to see Hans's ability to independently work the odor in such a way. Dogs can default to just following roads quite easily, and for him to track down the road and then jump straight into the grassland where they've exited is really, really impressive work from the get-go. So let's talk about some of the other elements that we're working on this track with Hans. The next key element, aside from the track starts, is having the team move around Hans in a way that is relevant to the work that they need to perform. Now, if you're pursuing a threat which is armed, which rhino poachers always are, you need to have security around the tracking team as they're working. So having your flankers, parallel with the dog, when the dog is showing that there's no signs of proximity alert or wafting of odor directly from the track layers, depending on the conditions, is a really good setting to have them at. Now, if the dog starts to show little bits of sign of a fire alert, that's when you would certainly wish to have them start pushing up in front of the dog whilst the dog is still working to provide added security and have them in a position to be able to react to contact much more effectively should anything occur, and should the dog handler miss any key signs of the proximity alert as they do get closer to the threat. So we'll switch over to the awesome drone view that we've got for most of the rest of the track. Now, as you can see, the terrain is thick, it's lush. I can tell you right now it was incredibly hot and humid, which made it for very challenging conditions for working during the day. Most of the time we worked by night. Now, as you can see, we're moving fairly slowly and we've got the two flankers out. Now, as I said before, the spacing behind me is significantly way too close and too risky if you're doing this for real, and you'd like to see them much more spread out behind you so that if anything should happen, not so many people get shot at the exact same time. However, for the purposes of what we were trying to achieve here, which is just integrating the team around Hans, totally fine. Now we've got the flankers off to the left and right of us as well, and in this setting here, as we're just tracking along, whilst the threat has increased as we've moved into the thicker brush, it's not so high risk as Hans is tracking very consistently, very steadily, and it's not showing any signs of proximity alert as we're working here. So it's important to note here that when I'm working a dog and whenever I train anyone to handle a dog, I'm always passing on that we need to be aware of not just the dog and the feeling that we get through the line and what it is we see in terms of the dog's behavior, but we need to combine that with a full awareness of the environmental conditions in which we're tracking. So being aware of the humidity, the level of UV, whether or not you're in the shade, whether you're in the sun, where the wind direction is, has the wind direction changed as you're tracking? Have you turned a corner as the wind direction therefore changed, whether the odor will have moved on the track as you're working it? Obviously you can tell if it's daytime or nighttime, but also having a clear understanding of what that's going to do to odor while you're working. So all of these things together combined, when you look at your dog, will begin to give you a clear picture of what it is that is actually happening on the track. So what we're seeing here in the footage is Hans showing me signs of the fire alert. So we've gotten a little bit of a waft of the odor pool from the track layers, but not enough that it's continuous and indicating that we are imminently about to step on them. Now, don't get me wrong, in this case here, please bear in mind the goals that we're trying to achieve, which is integrate Hans with the tracking team and have his focus on the track layers and not his backup officers. So at this point in time, we don't stop and consider the use of putting flankers out or doing a sort of clearing patrol or a flanking maneuver or anything like that. We're very much pushing forward, but we're slowing Hans down deliberately so that the proximity alert will be strengthened in the future, and the change in behavior will be clearer. And also, too, we're deliberately wanting to get a little bit closer and have the ranges push up in a manner that will be quite a lot of pressure for Hans to work through. Now, it's important that as we're pushing up the ranges, which you'll see soon, that has to be done in the initial stages when we are in the direct odor pool of the track layers. Otherwise, it's incredibly easy for an inexperienced dog out of odor to become distracted by the flankers and the backup team movement, especially when they're moving in tactical bounds through dry fire movement, taking fire positions and so on. That body language and that movement can be extremely distracting for a dog. So in these foundation steps here, we're doing it in the odor pool, which you'll see very, very soon. Now at this stage again, I can't iterate it enough that we would be behaving quite a bit differently for a more advanced dog without the goals that we have in mind. And I've probably made that point a few times throughout this video, and it's only because I just really want to drive home the point that when we're training these skills, there are a number of skills that we need the dog to be proficient at, and that we've got to break it down into those little steps and build them up so the dog becomes proficient. It's also important to point out that I'm dealing with people that whose first language is one other than English, and it's not as simple as being able to just turn around before a track and tell them exactly what it is that we're going to do and how we're going to do it. It took a lot of dry rehearsals without the dogs for hours before this to be able to get them proficient in a basic level in the movement that we're going to be performing when we're moving in on the threat. Now here you can see Hans has given the final alert. He actually gave the alert quite a bit before, which you saw in the video when I've slowed down and observed him. But what we can see here now is the track layers under the canopy in front of us being zoomed in helpfully by the drone operator there. And what you'll see as well is that Hans and myself have posted up, and the rangers are now starting to deploy into extended line to move up on the threat. This is incredibly challenging work for a dog to be able to handle. They need to be able to remain focused in that odor pool as the rangers move up and pepper pot. And Hans does a really, really great job in this. It is a little bit difficult to see, but Hans does a fantastic job. The other goal that we worked on in this track, which was quite enjoyable, was building up the ranger's confidence that should the handler be required to release the dog to apprehend a threat, that the dog will understand who it is they need to go bite. And so by having the flankers there, being in the direct odor pool, and having the faux poacher, in this case Christian, flee as the rangers are pushing up to make the apprehension, it was a really great confidence building activity for the rangers to know that the dog is significantly less likely to come and bite them and actually go and engage the threat. As you see, as Hans was moving in to engage Christian there were literally poachers within mere feet of him attempting to make that apprehension on the flank. Hans was incredibly clear, moved in really nicely, and we achieved the outcome that we've got here, which was just a really fantastic track and a really, really, really great training evolution for Hans and the anti-poaching unit that he's a part of. So just because it was a really fun end of the track, also wanted to share the POV perspective of Hans going in for the apprehension. Now, this is a really tough picture for dogs to see, having flanking friendly forces within their peripheral vision as they move forward to make an apprehension. Dogs who have not been exposed to that picture may potentially switch targets and target friendly forces, which is exactly what you don't want to have happen. So this was actually the third goal of the track for Hans, was to him to move forward and apprehend the threat as it fled, as the anti-poaching unit moved in to effect the arrest. Hans did really well, and this is also a really great confidence building exercise for the rangers there as part of the unit, as you know they have a pretty healthy respect for the dogs, and this was a really great exercise to give them confidence that if they do need to release the dog to conduct an apprehension, that they're significantly less likely to get bitten by their own dog and can move forward to support that animal as it does effect an arrest. All in all, really fun track. It was an amazing week and a phenomenal experience overall, for which I'll be forever grateful for. And I'm incredibly proud to see the results that Hans is achieving over there in that unit.